So please present yourself and tell us about your research.
So my name is Eric Ngang, and I come from Cameroon in the central part of Africa, and I am doing a PhD at the Birmingham Law School. And my PhD is looking at climate change and local knowledge and practices, the role of agrarian communities in formal law and decision-making processes. And my key question is asking what is it about the lawmaking process on climate change adaptation that enhances or not the incorporation of local knowledge and practice, which are broadly defined in my thesis as a sum total of the local people's way of knowing and doing that enables them cope or become resilient to challenges they faced around them using the local means they have.
Ahí, ¿qué explicó él? ¿Por qué había venido? Ya. ¿Qué es transformación para él?
What does transformation means to you?
Well, we live in a dynamic world which is constantly changing, and as humans, we need to also change or cope with those changes that are happening. And we can't be static. Given that we are in a dynamic world, there is a need for us to continuously reflect on how we adhere, we get used to those changes, we adapt to those changes, we mitigate the potential negative changes that happen around us. So that is for me the essence of transformation. So generally, in whatever thing we do as actors that are into development, as communities, we need to constantly reflect around the way we do things, the way we act, the way we think, and in line with a very dynamic world which is sometimes beyond our own control.
¿Cuál fue el contenido de su exposición?
So can you explain us a little bit further about your research?
Yeah, basically I'm looking at how communities using their own viewpoints actually get involved and influence the lawmaking process. And of course, when it comes to climate change lawmaking, at international level, there is a whole lot of dynamics around climate, the climate regimes, and we've got the international body, the International Panel on Climate Change, that's been very active in terms of looking at legislative processes around climate change. We've got these processes that often sometimes sideline, the contribution of local communities. They see communities basically as victims who should wait for solutions that are top down. But in my research, I actually am arguing that communities are not just victims of the climate change phenomenon. They have over so many generations developed, used their local knowledge and practices that have helped them cope with challenges around them, including the advent of climate change. And so my argument is that the lawmaking process, the decision-making process related to climate change need to consider the local knowledge and practices of these communities. And of course, we've got a lot of critics around the current legal process or legislative process around climate change that is not responsive to the needs of those who are down there at the grassroots, because it is assumed that these top-down processes are going to actually address the challenges they face. But if we are able to, if the lawmaking process or the decision-making process are able to bring these local actors around the table to be able to take into consideration their viewpoints, their local knowledge and practices, which I've earlier said I define in my thesis as their ways of knowing, their local tools, their local approaches which they've used from generations to generations, passed that from one generation to another through a collective process of learning, collective process of experience sharing, a collective process of experimentation. So if they're able to put that side by side, the scientific knowledge which is based on objective reasoning, on technocratic approaches, we're able to bring up, decisions or policies or laws that are more responsive to address climate change impacts, especially for communities that are at a rural level or local levels where the impacts of climate change are mostly felt. Now, so when we zoom down to the African context, where we've got over 70% of the population being smallholder farmers, that's depending on less than or equal to 2 hectares of farm, we will realize that well, climate change is going to affect them significantly. But these people, for over generations, have developed and used local ways of adapting to such changes, and it is very important for us to consider or value this contribution when we look at decision makings or policies related to climate change. So my research is about examining, the experience of Kenya as a case where there's been an advancement in the putting in place of climate change legislation and legislations to protect local knowledge and practice, how these processes were developed, and so be able to build on the concepts and the factors and the theories around this process and see how that can be applied beyond the Kenyan context. So that's the very heart of my research.
¿Qué importancia le da él a la comunicación para generar esta transformación?
What role do you give to communication to enhance or be able to... espera, voy a poner pausa. ¿Para qué?
Para que se produzca o sea, ¿qué
El
importancia
rol de
le
la
da?
comunicación para que de la...
Para que se produzca la transformación.
Perdón. It's so hard to translate sometimes. Okay.
Mhm.
It's easier like just sitting down. Okay. So what role do you give to communication to be able to enhance transformation?
When we look at transformation, we've got an interplay between, related to my research specifically, because that's a whole broad issue when we look at communication. But when when I consider my research in question, it's an interplay between science, policy, and society. And so you've got actors within these three categories I've mapped out in the scientific world, in the policy world, and society, at local level. These people need to be speaking to each other when it comes to transformation. So when you take my research in question, well, we've got a question I'm asking, but what is it about the lawmaking process on adaptation that would enhance the incorporation of diverse views so that laws become more responsive? You can't target just one actor. It's a communication between diverse multi-set of actors, policymakers. We've got people in the scientific world who think that the solution should be scientific, should be objective, and you've got communities that think, well, we've got our knowledge systems and we're finding the best way to communicate that so that that can be incorporated, and we've got a whole system of decision making, and we can be communicating with each other and making sure decisions don't affect some people negatively or benefit some people. So communication for me is at the heart of the transformation movement. So there is no way we can talk about transformation when we don't emphasize the importance of communication between diverse actors. I mean, if you look at even people who are in the technical world, how do scientists communicate with people who are in very technical sectors, those who are in academia, those who are in non-academia? So there needs to be that whole lot of communication around all these actors to be able to have everyone be on the same level platform, on the same playing field when it comes to decision making. And of course, if we want to drive decisions in a dynamic world where every actor, you can't ignore one actor and think that there's going to be transformation, because it's about leaving some people behind and expecting that we're going to move and embrace the changes that are happening around us. So communication is at the center of enhancing a level platform, a level playing field, giving appropriate opportunities for everyone to be able to contribute and advance as the world is changing as well.
Ya, ¿y qué tiene más, o sea, algo más que él quiera decir?
Something you want to add to this interview?
Well, I mean, my research is quite innovative in that we have, the international panel on climate change actually talking a lot about climate, about local knowledge and practice. We've got the contributing authors to the acclaimed or the highly revered, IPC report, especially those in the field assessment report saying, well, there needs to be a dedicated chapter on local knowledge and practices in the 2022 report, which is going to be one of the most global reports about the issues of climate change. We've also got recently the Paris Declaration that talked about, local knowledge and practices, and that opens a whole legal framework, at national and international levels. And so that calls for, more recognition on the importance of local knowledge and practices. And of course, my expectation is that my research is going to open up a new window of opportunity where we have actors actually understanding that there is a way to actually get local communities around the dialogue table to be able to bring their voices, their views, and their understanding around how they can contribute to address the issue of climate change, rather than a scenario where policy makers, those in decision making processes, and the scientists think that, well, solutions must always come from down there to address issues that are affecting communities. So it's gonna be a win-win for both those who are right up there and those who are down in the communities to be able to get around together and say, well, we have different knowledge systems to address this global phenomenon, and we can work together, communicate together to address these challenges.